can start, give it a minute for Sade and then we can get started.
All right, good evening, everybody. Thank you. We will get started with the regular session of the City of Kalamazoo Planning Commission, Thursday, April 6th. Can we have roll call?
Yes. Burgess?
Here.
Chambers? Here. Harrison? Milliken?
Here.
Patelko?
Here.
Pitts? Swan? Here.
All right, thank you. We have before us agenda. Did everyone get a chance to look at the agenda? Any changes to the agenda? No.
There are no changes.
One thing I'll note, just because I think most people are here tonight for the zoning code review. This is one part, the first part of probably 3 reviews that we'll do as a planning commission. There will be no decision on this tonight, no recommendation on this from this body tonight. We're just kicking off our review of this. We won't take public comment on it tonight, but as you'll note in the agenda, the item immediately after that is public comments. So we will be taking public comments then. So if you have any public comments regarding that or frankly other items, you will have an opportunity to share those under item H on the agenda. So seeing no changes to the agenda, can I get a motion to approve the agenda?
Motion to approve.
Motion by Swan, is there support?
Support.
Support by Chambers. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Great. In our packet, we had the minutes of the March 2nd Planning Commission meeting. Were there any comments, questions, concerns? If not, can I get a motion to approve those minutes?
I'll move to approve the minutes of the March 2nd meeting.
Great. Motion by Burgess. Is there a second?
Second.
Second, Patelko. All in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Great. Any communications and announcements?
No, except I want to make sure that we announce the call-in number for those that might want to call in later in the meeting. And if you don't have that number handy, Commissioner Milliken, I do.
I think I have it right here, 888, and thank you for that. And again, those public comments can be presented, or you can call in and we will take those comments later on in the agenda under item H, and that number 888-382-9556, 888-382-9556.
And Commissioner Milliken, or Chair Milliken, I actually do have one other announcement to make. We will need to reschedule our regular meeting in July, which occurs July 6th. We know we're going to have some absences. So we will find a new date for that meeting, which will either be the week before or ideally the week after, depending on schedules and how this chamber is being used by other bodies.
Great. Thank you for that. All right. There are no public hearings, so we'll move right into our discussion and action items. So the first one is the annual vote to delegate site plan review to the Site Plan Review Committee.
Hi, thank you. So April is generally our annual meeting. We do not have any formal cases this evening, so we have the opportunity, as you know from the agenda, to talk about, kind of kick off the zoning code update and go through the first few sections of it. But at the annual meeting, we always do 2 things. We the city staff requests of the commissioners that they delegate site plan review to the Site Plan Review Committee. And that is an action that this board takes and has taken for many years. And so that is the first of the two annual meeting items, the second item being election amongst yourselves of chair, vice chair, and secretary positions. So as it relates to the Site Plan Review Committee, you are well familiar. Often Bobby comes and talks at these meetings about the number of site plans that we do every year. There are, in a low year, 55, a high year in the 70s of site plans that are reviewed. Site plan review process is I'll call it a rather perfunctory process, although that kind of diminishes its importance and actually how complicated it is. But it is something that it's at the point of a project that it has the approvals necessary in terms of zoning and is going forward to make sure that it's meeting all of our other codes, right? So this is the opportunity for the building department to review it. Water, sanitary, streets, historic district, if it's related to historic districts, traffic, and of course, planning and zoning does another check. So it's a committee that's made up of staff from across all of those departments in the city. We have a pretty well-defined system for site plan review. It actually occurs in two steps. We do a pre-application meeting and then a full application meeting. And those are, one is, early, are you ready for site plan? Do you know what you need to present? And those type of details, and then site plan itself. It's a process that takes anywhere between, well, it's a minimum of about 4 weeks, right? And that is from the time you turn into the application till when you have your site plan approved. It could go on for many months because sometimes there's a lot of revisions and a lot of back and forth and research that needs to be done. So in some cases, site plans can take several months to get to completion before the committee is willing to approve them. So that's some background on it. I'm happy to answer any questions on behalf of Bobby Durkee this evening, who was unable to join us. But the request from city staff is approval to continue site plan review to occur at the Site Plan Review Committee.
Excellent, thank you. Are there any questions of staff? What this means or this process? We've done this for the entire time I've been on the commission and for many years before that. I think this is an excellent thing. This not only makes that process far more efficient than having to wait for our meetings and schedule all that work around the monthly or what would have to actually be bi-monthly meetings or semi-monthly meetings of our group.
Probably bi-weekly meetings.
Yeah. Well, many of the time when I was working in that capacity, we had to meet twice a month. And so, but then the expertise that's required to get into that level of detail is, I'm not sure what we would add to the process. So I am solidly in favor of this and glad that we're able to have this potential there for both the community and for staff. There's nothing else. Is this a roll call or just a voice vote?
I think it can be a roll call vote.
All right,
We'll
roll
just
call
do
it is.
Officially.
We probably need a motion. Is there a motion to approve delegating the site plan review to the Site Plan Review Committee?
Motion to approve site plan review to the site plan committee.
All right, motion by Swan. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Chambers. Any other discussion? Okay, roll call vote, please.
Burgess?
Yes.
Chambers?
Yes.
Milliken?
Yes.
Patelko?
Yes.
Swan?
Yes.
Great, thank you. Now the vote on commission officers.
So there are 3 officer positions with the Planning Commission, chair, vice chair, and secretary. Very quickly, the chair obviously runs the meetings, right, following Robert's Rules of Order. The vice chair fills in for the chair when they are absent, and the secretary would fill in if the other 2 were absent, is how it works, since we're lucky enough to have Beth take our minutes for our meetings. So those are our three positions. And in the past, we have either done a process that, you can throw your hat in the ring, you all could nominate other people on the group. However you wish to do it is perfectly fine. I think that we would start with the position of chair, which Chair Milliken currently holds. And I guess maybe we'll start with, is that something that you are interested in continuing? Maybe might be part of the first discussion.
Do you guys want me? All right. That's fine. I will continue. That's fine.
So I think we
Yes.
need a motion, if everyone is in agreement of that.
I would move that Mr. Milliken be chair for the next session.
I'll second said motion.
All right, we have motion by Burgess, second by Patelko. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Support? Or, yeah, yeah. Awkward. Great. So.
Vice Chair,
yeah.
which was previously held by Saki Vyas, who has termed off the board at our last meeting. So we don't have someone in the position currently. So we'll need someone new in that position.
May I? A couple people have suggested that I might be interested in that, and I thought about it, and I think, yes, I would, and I would enjoy doing that if the rest of the board would concur.
Excellent. Is there anyone else or any other discussion? If not, can we get a motion for Commissioner Burgess as vice chair?
Motion for Commissioner Burgess to be vice chair.
All right. Motion by Swan. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Chambers. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Great. Thank you, Dave.
And so our final position is secretary, which is currently Commissioner Patelko. And again, if you are interested in continuing, you can put your hat in the ring.
Sure, I'm happy to continue, though as you said, a lot of the traditional work of the secretary is done by Beth, and I very much appreciate your assistance and professionalism at these meetings.
Any other thoughts or discussion? If not, we'll take a motion to elect Commissioner Patelko as secretary.
So moved.
Motion by Patelko, or Commissioner Burgess. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Swan. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Great. Thank you very much. Congratulations to well. All right. Well, that concludes our election, and we'll move on to our zoning code and map update presentation.
Sure. Beth, you want to see if we can oh, yeah, look at you already there. Okay, wonderful. So at the last meeting of the Plan Commission, I gave, and at the Committee of the Whole meeting in front of the City Commission in early March, I gave pretty broad overviews of what we were doing with this code update, its intent, and what it included. And so just very quickly again, we have slowly been updating our zoning code since the master plan was approved in 2017. These code updates are intended to have the code align with the future land use plan and the goals of the master plan, as well as, the last time this code was overhauled was in 2005. And so we're, a different city. The code was written in a different way than we currently operate. It's written very technically. So making sure that the code is written in as clear language as possible. It's still a zoning code, so there's still going to be some of that. But so that the code is written in clear language and that it's easy to use both as an applicant and a developer, but also as a resident who's trying to do something, to their own personal property, as well as ease of staff being able to administer the code. So making sure everything is very clear. And those are the intents of this project. It is both a code update as well as a map update. And it focuses, this one is going to focus on commercial districts and then standards that are often associated with commercial development, including landscaping, fencing, signs, and lighting, and some updates to the parking code. The map involves about just under 2,000 parcels across the city that were reviewed as part of this project. Most of those were already in a commercial district and were reviewed to see if that district was to remain, if we we're going to use a new commercial district. There are situations where parcels are zoned something other than commercial, but because of their location or other factors have been included in this process. And there's circumstances where properties are zoned commercial, but they are not used for commercial. Sometimes the zoning kind of turned the corner and went down a residential block, and so making sure that we're correcting those. The previous code had a lot of, the previous map, or excuse me, the current map has a lot of situations of split zoning, which means that there's more than one zoning district applied to a parcel. You can't technically have standards from two different districts, base districts applied to one parcel. So, there's rules on how you handle that, but it's just easier and cleaner to have one district per lot. And so we're, some of this work is making sure that we're cleaning up that part of the map. About 2 weeks ago, the code went live online. We reached out to neighborhood associations with that information, local institutions, as well as alerting the development community that this code was available. For review, all of the properties and all of the tenants or occupants on those properties received a postcard alerting them to the rezoning. That was mailed at the end of last week, and I have started to get some calls, so I know that property owners or our tenants or occupants are starting to receive it. On that postcard, we listed the upcoming meetings that folks can attend, and we also used what's the Bookings app, which is a Microsoft product that allows those that are whose property is being rezoned through this process to do a one-on-one appointment with staff so they can understand what the changes will mean for their property. We also have updated, and let me see if this all works the way I want it to. We do have an Imagine Kalamazoo site for the zoning code update. And I'm just going to bring it up real quick. I'm sorry if I'm making you seasick. So besides some of the background that I just gave to you, that is on the Imagine Kalamazoo website. We also have access to the document. It's divided into small sections as well as the full document. You can submit comments by section in this location. And we also have kind of an interactive zoning map on this page. And so that allows you, it's the same tool that we used when we did natural features protection phase 2 mapping. So you can zoom in on a parcel and click it, and it'll show you the parcel number, the address, what it's currently zoned, what it's proposed to be zoned, and then some of the rationale behind that. So that is there for the whole city. We are working on, and we have them today, they're not up on the website yet, that exact map. We have it by neighborhood. I guess here's, well, the Western Michigan University neighborhood. So zoomed in by neighborhood, and we're going to have those small those PDFs available online. It won't be interactive like this, but if you really just care about a specific neighborhood and you want to get an understanding of what might change, you could just go to that neighborhood. We'll have the PDF of the neighborhood as well as a table of all the addresses that are included with the current zoning and the proposed zoning. So there'll be lots of different ways to navigate it. And then finally, we're going to be adding to the website a series of one-page documents. In one of the conversations I had with a property owner, they were unfamiliar with using the zoning code and going through it. And had some challenge, understanding, how to go and look at the use table and how it related to their property. So I'm going to create some one-page documents that talk about each district that we're working on through this update, including the use standards and some information on the dimensional standards that will be easy for people to look at. Okay, so the zoning code. So let's go to the table of contents real quick. There are, you know from previous conversations that part of this code update is slowly taking things out of Appendix A, the old zoning code, and kind of reviewing them, editing them, sometimes chucking them out and starting over again, and then putting those into Chapter 50, which is kind of the new home of the zoning code. So here are the table of contents, and I'll try and zoom in because it's a little small. Many of these are seeing some level of update. Some of it is just cleanup language. Some of it is the first time that it's been brought into Chapter 50. For example, lighting, signs, landscaping, today exist in Appendix A, and we are bringing those over, as well as some additional zoning districts. So what I thought I would do this evening, as Chair Milliken said, we have found it best to discuss big zoning updates in smaller chunks as we go along, and it's something that we've been doing over the last couple of zoning code updates, starting with NFP. We did it with the downtown zoning and some others. So tonight is the first night of that. We're taking advantage of the fact that we didn't have any formal cases this evening. So we'll probably talk about the first 4 sections or articles of the document tonight. I know you've all had a chance to review it. I can start to answer questions or at least take notes from things that, caught your eye or brought concern or you need more information on. And then at a future meeting, we'll talk about the zoning standards, both of the base districts as well as the overlay districts, and maybe we can do a deeper dive into the map that day, or maybe we just dive into the map a little bit each time. That's up to you. And then at the last meeting, or the third of these review sessions, we'll talk about parking, landscaping, signage, and lighting. So I just mentioned 3 meetings, right? So that is April, May, and June, right? So we won't be doing anything in terms of approval phases until after we get through those and are able to review and edit the document. So this section of the document is not terribly pretty. It's very code and text related. So I'll apologize in advance that there aren't pretty pictures on the slides, and it won't necessarily be very interesting to look at. And I'll pause on a couple of pages. So this is not, this page is not, before the code actually starts, the official code, we've created a section that we found several years ago. We created this section kind of on how to use this code. And we have found it very helpful for people to understand, what information do you need and where do you find it, right? Because if you're going to do a project on a property, you need to know what your zoning district is. And in many cases, you need to know what your street type is, because some of the standards are tied to the intensity of the street that you're on. We are going to add in here, this came up from an NFP board member, also asking a question, are you in the natural features protection overlay district right up front? And to make sure that is in that first little section. And then it goes, okay, once you figured out those things, then you know how to look at, then you can look at the use table, which is organized by district type. And then you can go look at the standards, which are also organized by district. So we found that a lot of applicants, particularly first-time applicants in the city, have found this section really helpful. So we'll continue to review and improve it. The first main section of the code are general requirements. And so this is pretty codey stuff, right? What is the purpose of the zoning code? Of course, a copy of the zoning map will be on the next page. Right now, the zoning code exists, and you can look at it, the existing zoning map. If you were to search our zoning map, or zoning code online, it takes you to an e-code site, electronic code site. And they have this great map program, and I'm going to humor me for a second because it's really cool, and if you haven't seen it, I want to show it to you. So when everything is said and done and the code is updated, people can go to this page to review the code. What is neat about this is that it has both the street types as well as the districts already on here, and you can filter by land uses that are permitted. You can search for a specific property, and then when you click on a district, this property is CN1. If you go to district details, right over here are all the uses as well as the standards. So super handy way to look at it. I wish we had that for the proposed, but this is a proprietary service that E-Code provides us. But when all is said and done, it will be here, and we have this tool as well. And this is above and beyond what's on the city's GIS website. This is specifically tied to the zoning code. So this is a really neat tool to kind of play around with as you're looking at properties. And I clicked on a CN1 property, so all the CN1 properties, are what's displayed here. Okay. Also in the code is always our street type map. We'll have a better map than what is here. We've had a few comments that it's not terribly legible. I understand that. We'll be putting a GIS related one that will look a little more like the map. But of course, that will be both in our GIS system as well as in the E-code system to make sure that those standards are being tied with the land use standards. You'll remember that these street types are from the Street Design Manual, which the city created in 2020 and 2021. And that's the document that we use when we review projects. And the traffic engineer uses that tool when he's reviewing, what's happening adjacent to a site or a project. We have always had street types associated with our zoning. We have since Imagine Kalamazoo and the master plan. The Street Design Manual kind of represents a refinement of those in a little more detail. And so these are the street types that we will carry forward from here on until there's another update. Okay. So the next section is definitions, obviously required by code. You will notice, I'm sure in your review, that the order, the numbering, they're in alphabetical order, but their outline is not right. Because every time we add, we have to change, we have to update and change them. So as we continue to add all of the required definitions for this update, we will, right before we bring this forward for final approval, make sure that it's in alphabetical order and in the correct organizational order. One of the things that we had a request for was to make sure that the defined term was called out with a different text. It will be italicized in the code moving forward, not just in this draft code. So in this draft code, all new language is in red font and italic. It will be italic moving forward, so you know that that term is defined. So there were a few changes to the definition section, and you'll notice every time I italicized the term, I called it out in red because that's how we know that when it gets uploaded to E-code that it's something new. So everything is in red, even if it's just a change in font style. A couple of new definitions. Most of the new definitions have to do with either cannabis or street type, not exclusively, but that's where most of the changes come from. The state regulating agency has adjusted some definitions for cannabis, and my guess is that they will continue to do so as they calibrate these rules for the state. And so we have made some changes in the definitions related to that. And the other big one is street types. And signs, excuse me. The other big category is signs, because we brought the sign code from Appendix A, where the terms were defined, bring it in here. We need to bring those definitions. So we did have street type definitions in there. Again, we had our old ones, and now that we have the opportunity to bring in the Street Design Manual updated street types, the old ones go out and the new ones go in, and those are the definitions that you see here. And we did, we really tried to do our best to make sure that we are striking everything, so it was very obvious to you what was being removed to help in your review. Okay. So the other kind of beginning of the document section is something that's pretty common in a zoning code, and that's rules for nonconformances. And so what's a nonconformance? So we always have to have rules in our zoning code that apply to properties that were developed or laid out or a business opened. And I'm on page 22 if you're following along. We need to have rules for how you handle those that existed prior to the new set of rules, right? Because they may not match with the most up-to-date set of standards. And so this section is found in every zoning code, and it's broken down by nonconforming uses, meaning the use no longer complies with the standards of the district in which that use is located in. Structures, right? So it could be the primary structure, it could be secondary structure. Lots, and that's pretty common in Kalamazoo, right? Because lots were created well over 100 years ago, different times, different standards, and so making sure that those lots can be used in a thoughtful way. And then something that we have had in the code for quite some time are what we call non-conforming site characteristics. And those are kind of the incidental or more minor elements that exist on a site. Things like the sign or the driveway, the parking. And so, we created that several years ago when we first started updating the code. We created those non-conforming site characteristics because having a non-conforming site is a barrier, depending on what your project is, for moving forward with the project, right? Because if you're doing a completely new, if you're expanding a building, for example, a non-conforming structure, more than 50, and you're doubling its size, all of a sudden you need to follow the code for everything. And so we didn't want people to get tripped up in doing things to their property for more minor details like, a non-conforming sign, driveway, landscaping. And so that's why we created non-conforming site characteristics. Those already exist in the code now. Okay. And of course, we also, because we have a form-based code for some of our districts, which includes facade requirements, we talk about when a building when a facade is non-conforming and when you need to bring it up to code. That is not new. That's been in the code. It's been in Chapter 50 since we created the LIVRC 1, LIVRC 2, and node standards to make sure that we were working with the existing structures that we have in the city. Okay. The next section talks about districts. We have, with this process, and we've talked about this at the previous Plan Commission meeting, and it was presented also at the March 6th Committee of the Whole. If you remember, we have many commercial districts that exist now, and many of them are kind of small niche districts that only allow a small number of uses or have restrictions on the size of the business, restrictions on residential being located in that district. We reviewed all the districts, all the commercial districts, and worked with a consultant, and we'll get into some of these details at the next presentation where we talk about standards, but we worked with a consultant to kind of start to cluster like commercial properties with each other so we could come up with the standards that match what is in Kalamazoo to make sure that we were creating as few nonconformances as possible with this code update. So we have currently in Chapter 50, we have several mixed-use districts, right? The LIVRC 1, the LIVRC 2, the neighborhood node, and we have our downtown districts. Last year, we brought over from Appendix A the community commercial or CC district. With this update, we are proposing to have 2 new commercial districts. So anything else that's in Appendix A, commercial office, commercial neighborhood office, CMU, RMU, commercial mixed use, residential mixed use, commercial neighborhood 1, commercial neighborhood 2, and all the ones that aren't mapped. Those will not be coming over to Chapter 50, and instead we have a commercial node and community commercial district 2. So I gave everybody a copy of the future land use plan, and I know that's a document that you guys look at pretty regularly when you're reviewing zoning cases. In the 2025 master plan, in the 2025 master plan, here's a copy of it for the audience here and at home. Master plans always have a future land use plan in them, and so it is a citywide 10,000 foot up kind of review of the city. It's not zoning exactly, but it says, this type of use or district would be appropriate in these locations. And then their zoning code is supposed to take that information and align with it and support it. So I gave you a paper copy as well of the future land use development map, so you would have that, because a lot of our work that we do when we rezone a property, reviews that map as part of the process. The future land development map included both a neighborhood node and a commercial node in it. several years ago, we created a neighborhood node district, right? It was a small, urban, highly walkable, mixed-use district, things like Washington Square, the Vine neighborhood, several locations in the north side, and so that has existed for several years. But the future land use plan also talks about a commercial node, right, which is slightly larger, where the neighborhood node really is small and serves those typically within walking distance. A commercial node is bigger, it will serve multiple neighborhoods. In Kalamazoo, it typically has a grocery store in it, although not always. And so there's a mix of people who drive as well as walk and take transit. They're usually a little more intensely developed. And so we created a district that matched that master plan category, and that is commercial node. And so it will be in here, it will have standards, and it is mapped in locations that are found to be commercial nodes in the master plan. The second new district is the community commercial district. So we found so we have community commercial, our big one, big CC. It exists, it has existed in the code for a while. It is defined as, providing regional shopping opportunities, right? Large shopping centers, large scale commercial, typically found on large, busy arterial corridors, like Stadium Drive, like Drake, parts of M43, very south edge of Portage, very south ends of Westnedge, kind of the character that I'm talking about. But that doesn't fit other commercial areas in the city. And so we created the Community Commercial 2 district to cover those. This is smaller scale commercial. This looks at small to medium-sized lots. It is used in places, we propose to use it in places where the commercial corridor that it's on, often it has residential blocks teeing into it, so you have people who are both walking and driving to those. Typically, the lot sizes are 1 acre or less compared to large shopping centers, which sometimes are 5 or more acres. And so that's the difference between the two. And when you look at the use table, which we can talk about in a minute, there are some more restrictive, it is a little more restrictive in its uses than the large scale one. And so that's kind of the difference between the two. Overlay districts. We already had the natural features protection overlay in chapter 50, so that is not new. We brought over the planned unit development district. The planned unit development district, we haven't had one of these in, I think since 2010 or 2008. And I think the last one was near Arboretum Parkway. A planned unit, but it's a tool that we keep in our zoning code, as in case large properties come forward that need flexibility in their development. It is used when the strict base zoning of those properties or that large parcel don't necessarily lend itself for the type of development that's coming forward, because the type of development that's coming forward is a mix of uses or very large or unique in some way. If you look at the zoning map in the city, you'll see a variety of, I think they're blue or teal color. They exist throughout the city. They are mostly residential in nature, and that's how the tool's been used in Kalamazoo. So we brought that overlay district from Appendix A to Chapter 50, made very few changes, just cleaned up the language, tried to make it very simple. A good chunk of the work in looking at the planned unit development district will actually occur when we bring over the review bodies section, because there's a very specific review process that you do with planned unit development. So there'll be more things when that section gets brought over. The other overlay district that we brought over actually is not an overlay district in Appendix A. We're trying to figure out if we can make it an overlay district moving forward, and that is institutional campus, or IC. As it exists today, it is, in Appendix A, it is a special district, right? So when it is applied on a property, it's only applied in one place currently in the city, and that is on Kalamazoo College's property. We recently updated their 10-year master plan requirement. We are toying with how that could maybe be an overlay district rather than a full new district. So we'll see how, as we kind of continue to review the document, how that works. Nothing significantly changed in bringing it over, so whether it is a special district or an overlay district, the requirement for a master plan that's reviewed every 10 years is not changing. The requirement to include information about proposed buildings and streets and circulation and parking and stormwater, none of those things would change, but are just toying around with how we would use it, how it could be used best, and where else it could be used in the city. And so for right now, we have it as an overlay district. And we just need to understand what the implications are. But what's in it, again, does not change. I'm going to stop there before we go into uses, because that was a lot. I'm sorry, I kind of kept rolling. I meant to stop earlier. What questions do you have on those first few sections? Definitions, nonconformances, districts, overlay or base districts that I can answer for you.
What questions do people have? Dive in.
I'll take a stab at one.
Go for it.
Let's see.
And if you
Districts.
could let me know, Commissioner, what page you're looking at, I'll try and bring it up so
Yeah,
those at home and those in the audience can somewhat read.
I'm
I
looking
know
at
it's small.
Page 26. And I was just wondering if you could help me distinguish the difference between Community Commercial 2 and the live work.
Sure. So they are relatively similar. There is a bit of a relationship there, right, between Live Work 2, which is our slightly more intensive mixed-use district, and then Live Work 1, compared to Community Commercial, our more intense commercial district, and Community Commercial 2 as, you know, the lesser intenser district. So we have those two, the two being mixed use and the two being, you know, pretty traditional commercial districts. Live Work 1 is a form-based district, right? It has requirements when you are doing a project in Live Work 1 that you have to adhere to. Those are our lot type standards that are in Article 5 of the code. So there are requirements for entrances and transparency. There are requirements for locating the building in closer proximity to the sidewalk, because Live Work 1 is typically located on our more urban walkable corridors, where walking and transit riding are a pretty common mode of transportation. CC2, on the other hand, does not have those standards, those facade requirements in it. It does, again, we'll talk about this at the next one where we really get into the details of the standards. It tries to blend the fact that it's located in places where people both walk and drive. And so how do you think about when a new project is developed? How do you think about it relating both to the street as well as to the auto-oriented nature of it? So it tries to hedge those two lines. Their uses are relatively similar. It's more of the dimensional standards that are different.
So we've got, one is a form-based and the CC is not.
Correct.
And it does seem sometimes like some of the districts kind of dissolve into the next. And it's sort of, and that makes sense. So, okay, thank you.
Do you have any other questions to this point? You sure? Okay. Anyone else? I guess on a similar vein, and I won't ask you to distinguish right now, but I guess I'll just encourage on page 8, I guess 17 and 18, the definition of street types. You know, we want to keep them somewhat flexible in general, just so that because there's a lot of different streets and they're all very unique in their own way, and so you can't have, you know, 900 different definitions and categories. So there's got to be a certain degree of flexibility, but I think we need a little bit greater distinction between some of these because they do blend together a little bit too much, I think. So I'd encourage you to look at those definitions and just maybe provide a little bit more clarity so that, like for example, enhanced neighborhood and neighborhood network. When I read those definitions, absent the map, they they just seem like the same thing.
Sure.
So I just take a look at those.
Yeah. Are there specific things that you would like to see in the definitions to help differentiate them? I ask because these are the definitions that are used in the street design manual. But in the street design manual, they have the benefit of all these graphics. You know, each page has all these graphics and talks about the different facility, like, you know, what bike facilities might be allowed there, or transit facilities, and, you know, how wide the lanes are. So it's a better, it's a more rounder definition.
I don't know that I can answer that. Just
Okay.
something to make it a little, something to draw a clearer distinction between, so that when, as an applicant, I come in and maybe I'm unhappy with the standards, I can't then argue, well, this isn't enhanced neighborhood, this is a neighborhood network. You know, I can't play that game just to try to finagle my way into a better standard or something like that.
Great, I can do that. Any other questions in those first few sections before I go on to uses?
Everybody good? All right, thank
Okay,
you.
great. I think that was page. Okay. Should I go to 27 first? Okay. The use section. So the use section includes both the principal use of the lot as well as the any accessory uses or accessory structures on the lot. So things like accessory dwelling units are listed in the accessory uses. Garages are an accessory structure or secondary structure, and so that's where you will find those. Both of them have their own table, and the table is organized by district, right? So if we were to look at the table, at the top, it has the district name. The uses are kind of lumped into categories with other like uses. And they are, you'll see that there's three kind of ways of defining whether or not a use is permitted or not. And so we either say it's permitted, which is P, which means it's just flat out permitted by right. It could be an S, which means it requires a special use permit, which you know comes to this body. A special use permit is a use, or is for use that is appropriate for a district, but may not be appropriate on every lot in that district. There's some element of it that may require additional review. You know, there's a series of 7 or 8 criteria associated with a special use review, and I know you guys have seen those fairly regularly, so you know what I'm talking about. The other defining character of the, or a description in the use table is what's listed here as PD, which is permitted with development standards. For the most part, that means that that use is permitted by right as long as there are certain standards being followed. So for example, let's look at, you know, a lot of the residential ones are permitted with development standards in commercial districts. In some cases, they're permitted by right as long as they're not up against the front facade on the ground floor, right? Because we are trying to make sure that that commercial is right up against the front of the building. It's the active part of the building. Residential is permitted, but it must be either behind or above. And so that's an example of a development standard. And so when you are using the code, you would figure out, you know your district, you think about the uses that you want to provide on your site, go down the table and understand if you need to look at specific standards which follow the table or not. The use table falls over the course of 2 pages, and so I'll flip to that in a second. Most of the changes in the use table relate to our new districts, right? Because every time you add a district to the code, you have to include the use standards as well as any dimensional standards, which is in the next section. And so that represents most of the changes to the use table. And you'll see commercial node and CC2 in the right column of those tables. The other change, again, at the state level, we've had some changes in cannabis licenses and license types. And so we have some changes as it relates to those. Very specifically, micro business, which is an adult use type of cannabis, or also known as recreational. And micro businesses exist now. It's a license type that the city of Kalamazoo allows for. Obviously, the state allows for it. And the way it's written right now is it's a little bit like craftsman industrial, right? You can grow, you can process what you grow, and you can sell what you grow. The struggle that the state has found is you can only use what you grow, and that is not necessary, and there's a limit on the number of plants you can have, and that has been found to not be very economically viable. So they've created a second license type called License A, Class Type A of a micro business, that increases the minimum or the maximum number of plants you can have and allows you to bring in product from other growers. And they have, again, found that that has increased the economic viability of these businesses. And so that is a change that's been included in the code. I'm not going to go over, I'll go over some of the use changes. Let me find one that I know will be interested in. Okay, vehicle services. This is on page 41. So vehicle services is defined as a category of uses that involve the servicing of vehicles and/or the sale of fuel. General retail is often associated with vehicle service use, and this category can include things like service shops, car washes, gas stations. These are generally permitted with development standards with some exceptions, right? And those are all noted in the text here. So one thing that changed is car washes, have been listed as requiring a special use permit in all locations. When we reviewed the commercial districts and collapsed and created our new ones, we were looking at how they get differentiated between each other. And so we determined that because of the intensity of the community commercial district and where it was located on large arterials, often near highways, and places that are very auto-oriented and might expect to have car washes, that it could be permitted by right in that location. So that's the rationale for that proposed change, and that's obviously something that we can discuss. Underneath it, you'll see that there's some striked out text as it relates to outdoor vacuuming that did not go away from the code. It just moved down a couple of lines. And so that's listed under outdoor activities. It's the same language, just on a different line. Outdoor vacuuming is not permitted on lots adjacent to an open space, park, or preserve. Outdoor vacuuming is not permitted on lots adjacent to a residentially zoned district or residential zoning district. So that it wasn't being removed, it was just shifting its location to be under outdoor activities, not just under car washes, because you could have outdoor vacuuming at a gas station as well, and so we wanted to make sure that it was very clear that it applied to all service uses. I am going to skip down, because we've already talked about the micro business. That's another, change, cannabis change to the code. I'm going to skip down to accessory uses. We added, obviously, the accessory use table, which is located on page 52. Looks very similar to the primary use table, right? Organized by district with the accessory uses and structures on the side. Same set of standards. It's either permitted or permitted with development standards. All of the accessory uses and structures that we currently have listed in Chapter 50 do require some set of design standards, and so that's why they're all listed with as permitted with development standards. The one new one I wanted to call to everyone's attention is the keeping of poultry or rabbits. That is something that's allowed now, right? But those standards exist in the municipal code, in the animal code. And it includes things like setbacks and those type of details in the animal code of the municipal code. Those type of regulations are zoning regulations and should be in the zoning code, which is why we're bringing them over. And so we'll be working with the city attorney's office that when this package comes forward for review and approval, there will also be changes made to some of those municipal code sections, like the animal code. So it's being transferred over here. Does anybody have any questions on the accessory structures, accessory uses, or the use section of the code?
Any questions? Go- Yeah, go for it.
Sure. Let me see if I can word this in the way I'm thinking.
Sure.
The idea of permitted with development standards required is kind of new to me. Can you talk a little bit about what the intention is there? And I wonder about if having that reduces the amount of need for special use permit requests and things like that.
Sure. So it's something that we have used in the code since we started updating it. I'm sorry if I'm making everybody sick. I was going back up to the use table. Did I already pass it? No, sorry. Our zoning code right now kind of has this, right? If you look at Appendix A and you go to the use table, at the very end is a note column, and then you then have to go to the note section, and it may say, you know, it requires X, Y, or Z, or needs a special process, or doesn't need a special process. And so even our Appendix A code has that a little bit. We started using permitted with development standards back in 2018 when we started doing the code, because there were, we looked at all the uses and tried to, you know, when you think about a use, you think about what are its impacts, right? What are the impacts on adjacent property? What are the impacts to the street? What are the impacts to each other, then the area around it? We found that if uses followed certain development standards that were unique to that use, then they didn't need additional approval, right? These were things that we often talked about with special use permits. So a bed and breakfast is a good example. Bed and breakfast back in the day were a special use. But a bed and breakfast with a certain set of standards associated with it was found to be, you know, permittable and permissible without having to go through the extra process. I think often zoning codes have a lot of extra regulation and process in them. Sometimes it is perfectly warranted. Other times it's just kind of been the history of zoning, is that, you know, control and level of power and scrutiny of every project. And there are other ways to think about it. And we decided to use the permitted with development standards in that way.
I can see that. I could see how you go through enough special use permit processes that the same questions keep coming up on certain things, and perhaps you build it into a development standard to make the process easier. Thank you.
I just had one question, but something like, just to make sure I'm understanding, something like natural features protection would apply regardless of whether something was designed, design or not. If natural features protection precluded something, then it.
Right. So natural features protection is an overlay district, which sits on top of the base district. All these uses are associated with our base districts. Natural features protection has its own set of standards, and they apply according to Chapter 6 of this document accordingly. So it's not, it does not operate in the same way.
Thank you.
That's not to say, Commissioner Patelko, that you couldn't create an overlay district that does have a set of uses that might have standards like this associated with it. Natural features protection does not. Sorry, couldn't help myself.
Other comments, questions? No? All right, we can always revisit if we have other thoughts. I sent you one specific comment on a line on page 41. There's, I think, some wording that needs to be tweaked.
Okay.
But it's very specific.
Okay.
I know, the question. The issue that we had a lot of variance requests for in the past several years about ground floor residential, is that addressed and tackled in
Yes,
this?
we should not see any more of those.
Okay.
So all of our mixed-use districts allow for residential in that district. Let me take a step back. Ground floor residential not located against the front facade is located in just about, in all of our commercial and mixed-use districts. Node, which we're really trying to have, those two node districts, which are really meant to be active commercial areas, definitely want commercial in that front occupied space of the building. Downtown 1, which is mapped on the mall, right? Definitely want that to be commercial space, a variety of commercial uses, permitted there, because you're looking for that activity. You're creating that activity in the street. And community commercial, our large commercial district, it does allow for residential, but again, we want to make sure that what's facing the street-facing property lines is commercial. Our other districts, Downtown 2, Downtown 3, Livework 1, Livework 2, and Community Commercial 2, allow residential or commercial on the ground floor without that front facade or up against the front restriction. And that is because the pattern of development in Kalamazoo is pretty hodgepodge on our corridors, right? We go back and forth. We don't have necessarily huge, long stretches of just commercial or just residential, and it goes back and forth. In the places where it is sacred, we've applied the node district, right? So Washington Square, for example, right? That block, we wouldn't want residential on the ground floor. So the other districts understand that our pattern on many of our commercial corridors goes back and forth, both on the lot, right? Sometimes it's mixed use vertically, which is very traditional. We can all picture that. Often it's, this parcel's commercial, this parcel's residential, commercial, residential, residential, commercial, and that's what we have in Kalamazoo, and that's okay. That is not what the 2005 code did, though, right? When those districts, before we started to change them, commercial districts did not allow residential on the ground floor, and we had a whole host of variances dating back to when I used to be on the Zoning Board of Appeals, when I was not a city employee, that came forward as a result. And so this is, it's one of those things that it's, that you need to start to update the code, right? When you start to get the same variances over and over again. So yeah, we've made those changes.
Good, thank you. Anything else on this section? All right. Good, thank you.
So those are the sections that I wanted to get through tonight. I know it's a lot. I know that parts of it, it's not a lot of pictures. It's hard to look at, but they're necessary parts of the code. So again, at the next iteration of these presentations, we can start off with questions that may have percolated or developed in your mind from this first set of information. And then we can look at, again, I would suggest that we maybe look at the dimensional standards for districts as well as the overlay districts. And we can dive into the map at that time if you want. And then at that third meeting, we'll talk about all the other pieces of development associated with commercial development, like parking, because we've made some changes to parking, including moving from a minimum parking requirement to a maximum parking requirement, which is something that cities are doing around Michigan in the country to help manage excessive parking in places. And then, of course, signage, landscaping, fencing, lighting did not exist in Chapter 50 prior to, well, they still don't, but would be included in Chapter 50 after this proposal. So those are, those are new to us. How about if we phrase it like that?
Good. Can I ask one map question?
Yeah, absolutely.
On several of these parcels that are highlighted are changing to residential districts. Can you explain why, you don't need to talk about specifics, but just in general, why there are residential changes involved?
Is there one that you want me to talk through? Because I have them.
No,
Okay.
I'm not concerned about a particular
Okay.
one. I'm just in general when
Sure.
since the emphasis is on commercial districts.
Sure. Those are parcels that were zoned commercial that do not operate, are not appropriate for commercial. So if you look at this map here, and we'll probably leave this one up, you'll see that there's several brown parcels, right? Those are actually residential parcels. In some cases, they were split zoned. In some cases, they were all commercial. So if we look at these down here off of Stadium Drive, they have kind of skinny driveways that go back. Those are manufactured and mobile home developments that were zoned community commercial.
Okay.
So some of this is repairing, putting back the way they, to what they are actually used for. And you'll see that throughout the whole community. I'm trying to find another, if there's another good one. You'll see it a lot on Portage Street and Stockbridge area, where the commercial just kind of went in a few blocks, right, or turned the corner. And I think that was the prevailing thought at the time, right? We want to make sure that we are allowing for ample commercial development to serve our community. So when you have, lots that front a commercial street, and then you have these residential lots that face the residential street, a couple got grabbed, right, to make sure that that front parcel, if it was developed as commercial, it had ample size to it. And so we tried to be very mindful of that when we made the changes. So again, I think I mentioned it at the beginning, about 2,000 parcels. We really tried to review, one by one, which is one of the reasons why we've been talking about this project for so long, but haven't yet brought it forward, to understand, what is it zoned now? Where is it located? What does the future land use plan say? And then make a decision. And so not all those 2,000 parcels are resulting in a commercial designation. In some cases, it's removing the commercial designation because that is not what is the most appropriate district there.
Excellent. Thank you.
And again, we'll be putting these by neighborhood maps up online. And they're just kind of they're not interactive like the one online, but it's just a nice way to kind of look and see what's happening in an area. The key to the right only pulls from what's within that neighborhood. So the map might show changes outside of the neighborhood, but that key only relates to what's within that thicker black line, if you were to be looking at them. And some areas have, no change. So.
Excellent. Any other questions or comments for staff? All right, thank you. Well, commissioners, now that we've gone through these chapters, I'd encourage us all to re-go through those chapters now that we've had this in-depth review / introduction to the changes. If there are specific questions or comments like, what's this word? Or why is this? Or I think there's a double negative or something like that, then those are easy things to just email to Christina and let her know. If they're more substantive, or I'm not sure I agree with this, or why is it this way, or I think we should talk about this, then those are the types of things that we definitely want to bring up at our next meeting and talk about it as a group and share your thoughts and have that discussion here as a commission. And then, as she said, we'll talk about the next couple chapters, and so we can kind of anticipate that coming up next time.
Yeah, I think we'll do at least chapters 5 and 6. Maybe that's all we'll do, because those are the dimensional standards that are associated with the new districts, and I want to make sure that we're talking through them. I know that when we started to bring them up, there were a couple questions, such as we have a minimum and maximum lot size, which is something unusual for a commercial district, and what that looks like. So I promise there'll be some more pictures next time. It won't be quite as boring as me reading text to you, but we'll go through that. So if you please, bring any questions from 1 through 4. Look at 5 and 6. And let's be prepared to talk about that then. And then we can also spend some time looking at the map. I don't know if we'll have any cases for that meeting. The deadline is tomorrow, so it might be another meeting where we have a lengthy opportunity to talk through it. There are, and I didn't say it and I shut it, we have a series of public meetings scheduled. This is a copy of the postcard that was sent to the, all the properties, occupants and tenants. And it included, basic background, how to access the information in Spanish, how to set up a one-on-one appointment with staff if your property is being rezoned, and it lists meetings. So we have 3 meetings kind of spanning the city for this project. Each is meant to be a general meeting about the whole code updates. You can come to all of them, you can come to one of them. It doesn't have to be the one near where you live. We just tried to make them convenient across the city, and they're all at different times. So on Wednesday, April 19th, from 5 to 6:30, we'll be in the Van Dusen Room in the Central Library. So that's the top floor. On Thursday, April 27th, from 7 to 8:30, we're going to be in the Hornet Suite, which is the building, the athletic fields for K College. There's a second story with a big conference room in there, accessible elevator access, large parking lot. That's at the corner of Burroughs and Old West Michigan. And on Wednesday, May 3rd, from 6 to 7:30, we'll be at the Edison Neighborhood Association. So several opportunities to come and get a presentation and learn about the broader code update, have discussions. Those are kind of the broad, come all, hear about it meetings. If you want to talk about your specific property and have concerns or questions, I would encourage you to reach out to staff directly so we can have a conversation and look at a map together and go through those, go through any questions you have. We can do it in person, we can do it over Zoom, we could do it on the phone if that's what's most convenient and what is available.
All right. Thank you very much. And there is no site plan report tonight, so we will move right into public comments. So we'll ask that if you'd like to make a comment this evening, you come forward, state your name, address, limited to 3 minutes. And there's also, is the sign-in sheet there, or is it over at the podium?
It's right here.
Oh, it's right there at the podium. So we ask that you sign in as well. And that's it. And also, if you're listening online, you can call in, and that number again is 888-382-9556. So we'll take those call-ins after we've taken everybody who's here in the audience. So feel free to make a line, and we'll have you come up one at a time, please. Thank you.
I need to fill this out first, right? Oh, we all just flooded. We all just flooded for the first time. This is April. April showers bring May flowers. No one has did anything about the flooding, but all you talk about is rezoning. And I know my little green space is probably in your zoning, which is only 5 acres of natural wetlands. It's natural, it's 60% wetlands, it's 40% in the floodplain. It saves our homes from flooding. My neighbor has had water pumping out of his basement for 2 days, and it's literally pouring out of the water hose. We just flooded yesterday. I went around and looked around, and every storm drain that I looked in was full of water. The one on Lake Street, the one down by Uptown Park, the one over on by the ponds, in between the ponds, that street, I think it's Forest Street. They were so full, they had leaves, excuse my French, they had duck poop, and they had water in it, and they were up to the top, and it was packed down in there. So how is that supposed to help us when the ponds overflow? If all the storm drains in my whole neighborhood are like that. I went to the one by Bronson where the new cancer center is. Same thing, full of water. That little street that goes beside the cancer center, between the cancer center and the back of the senior service building. It was full, up to the top, just like every single one I've looked at. Now, that street was not flooded. So why was that storm drain flooded? The street by the ponds, that little street that goes through Forest Street, was not flooded either. But the storm drains are. My street was not flooded for once, but the storm drains are full up to the top. All you talk about is building. It's time to do something about this flooding. We are people too. We live in Kalamazoo. I've been here all my life. And I shouldn't have to worry about every time it rains, where am I going to go stay? How am I going to get out of my neighborhood? Because we can't get out. I work 2 jobs. I have to go to work. You take this green space away, and all our homes from Walter Street all the way down to Lake and Burdick to Crosstown, all of us will be underwater, including in our yards and everything else. If you want to build in my neighborhood, put whatever you want to put in the old DHS building. It's a big empty lot. It's not being used for anything. It's just sitting there. Why destroy a natural green space? The watershed is back. I took pictures, but I didn't get a chance to get copies of it. The water is back up again. So that means that much water that's in that little watershed, in that green space, is not in my backyard, and it's not in any of our basements. All I've been asking for 6 years is for somebody to do something about it.
My name is Gregor. I reside at 726 West Kalamazoo Avenue, and I'll read fast. For the Commission, I believe that no part of the property south of Stadium Drive from Seneca Lane to Drake Road should be zoned for commercial development. I believe this unique property should be zoned such that in the future it could become part of the Asylum Lake Preserve, or at the very least a city park. And there are important reasons beyond beauty. Kalamazoo's water supply is dependent on the aquifers and the surface water hydrology, of which Asylum Lake is an important part. Protecting the chain of lakes and waterways that stretch through our city isn't just for looks. It's critical to the city's future. We're fortunate in Kalamazoo to enjoy a safe and abundant water supply, but we have to be vigilant. A 2008 WMU study of Asylum Lake conducted by Kaiser and Associates found that, quote, stormwater inputs are significant and pollutants are mainly entering the lake from drains located near Stadium Drive and Drake Road, end quote. Then in 2019, the lake was impacted by an accidental discharge from a WMU construction site across Drake Road. Further commercial development on this property around the lake, especially water and chemical intensive businesses like car washes and gas stations, invites more damage to our water system. A natural area has economic benefits. It provides habitat for pollinators and pest control for agriculture. Trees and green space, we all know, help mitigate the effects of pollution. We also know this property beautifies an important gateway to our city. Do we really need more plazas, car washes, and chain restaurants there? The only downside to preserving this area is that a few people will make less money. I would challenge the Commission to take the steps toward creating something for the community and the future that can last longer than this year's business opportunities. Don't change the zoning of this area to commercial. Do not approve the changes in the zoning ordinance that would exempt car washes from requiring a special permit in community commercial zones. And do not brush aside the spirit of the natural features overlay with exemptions to water down the environmental protections that it provides. This is going to be a legacy decision. Once the heavy equipment moves in, it'll be too late to save this beautiful land. And I know deciding against commercial development will raise the ire of those focused on money and economic growth, but no one's going to look back in 50 years and say, isn't it great the leaders in 2023 had the foresight to put gas stations, car washes, and strip plazas here? I hope the Commission and the whole community will have the foresight to realize that a city that stewards a treasure like a public preserve adjacent to Asylum Lake will have economic growth because it will be a city where people want to live.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Come on.
Let's try to keep things calm so we can keep moving through this efficiently. Okay.
My name is Celine Salant. I live at 2506 Ferdin Road. I'm a longtime Winchell resident and a state-permitted wildlife rehabilitator. I treat sick, injured, and orphaned mammals. Everything from vaccinations, medications, subcutaneous fluids, disease prevention, and shelter are all 100% administered and funded by myself. When my patients are fully sufficient and rehabilitated, they are released back into their native environment. But my fear is that I will release these survivors into a changing environment where they will have nowhere to go. I believe profoundly that protecting native wildlife and the green spaces they inhabit is paramount. I oppose the parcel on Drake being designated for commercial use. The Natural Features Protective Ordinance should not be altered for the monetary interests of a few. 3 years ago, we as local residents made a strong, collective, and decisive statement against the development of protected land. On behalf of our diverse native wildlife whose sanctuaries are systematically being appropriated for reasons they don't understand, I ask that we remember the purpose of why we composed protective initiatives to begin with. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Iris Potter. I live at 1204 Manor Street. First thing I want to say is I want to say thank you to everybody who came here tonight, and I know that if we go forward with the zoning change, you'll see a lot more people at the City Commission, and even here, and at the public meetings. What those folks said is exactly right. 3 years ago, we told you, long-term residents, people who love this city, that we don't want a car wash. So we can say this meeting isn't exactly about a car wash. However, everything that's been stated leads it to that. I want to ask if all of you have been to that land, at that corner. It's a hill. We have a natural features protection overlay that somewhat protected it prior. We're going to change that to support development. Believe me, we're already supporting development in this town, and we're not even close to being apparently done. A lot of the developers, including potentially this one, if it's the same one from 3 years ago, they're not local developers. They probably wouldn't even make a difference. But we're selling ourselves out. We need green. We need it. We need trees. We need those to live. So I'm very strongly opposed to that, making that area county or community commercial, and also making it easy for car washes and other developments. We can't keep selling out like that. I mean, don't you all want to have a beautiful city? They already have 3 car washes here. We don't need another one. I'm extremely concerned about Asylum Lake area. I watched the old Colony Farm orchard be taken by WMU for the BTR park. Where did all the wildlife go? And also, look at Asylum. It's much different now. It's much different. We've tried to save it before. And honestly, if you put a very large car wash, I'm sure you've all seen those, it's extremely large. It will affect all the apartment complexes. It will affect the whole lake. So let's step back. Let's pull a couple things out of there, and let's do it for all the residents. Thank you.
So when I was a swimmer and people would do a good dive, they'd clap twice. So maybe if you want to acknowledge something positively, just clap twice, and then we can, again, I'm not trying to quell your enthusiasm, I'm just trying to keep things moving smoothly here.
Hi, I'm Nate Hartman. I live at 2216 Frederick Avenue. I love Asylum Lake. We already had the discussion 3 years ago. This is a decided thing. The community absolutely does not want the natural feature protection order to be removed. I don't even know why we're having this conversation again so soon. So I want to come out as strongly as possible against rezoning and also removing that protection. Thanks.
Chris Wills, I live at 2627 Lorraine Avenue. We were here 3 years ago, January of 2020, before the big pandemic. A few of you were here that night. I think probably about 3 of you were here that night, at least in your positions that you're in now. At that time, we had probably about 300 people flood this room with their opinion, speaking out against, at that time it was the car wash and rezoning and the Natural Features Protection Act, which is the same today. Even if the car wash isn't what goes in there, just changing the zoning to CC is going to totally eliminate the buffer. It's going to just, the health and vitality of Asylum Lake, will be destroyed by destroying that property. There's no taking it back after it's done. That night I presented a petition that had gathered 8,200 signatures against making those changes. Later that week, it went up to 10,000 signatures. People in the area, the city of Kalamazoo and the county, who all use that property, are adamantly opposed to changing that to a commercial zone. And I guess the big thing is, once it's done, it's done. You start changing that, and you're not going to be able to build it back. It would take hundreds of years to build that back. And, it would just be a shame to have that happen. It was spoken tonight that, they review the master plan every 10 years or so, which, that's great. Let's say, a building goes in, let's say another car wash, because you can't have enough of those. There's 3 monstrosities of those already in town, plus sparkle buggies down the street. If someone can't drive 2.4 miles to one, I don't understand, the thinking in that. But, you put one of those in there, you change it in 10, 20 years and say, oh, well, maybe that wasn't such a good idea after all. Well, the car wash is there, or whatever building is there. You've just destroyed the land, the health, vitality, the Asylum Lake needs, the whole area, all the animals, they're all going into Winchell neighborhood, they're going onto Stadium Drive getting hit. It's, the lake itself is suffering already. It just really needs some type of protection, and I think that's something that we as citizens should be able to provide for them. Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Katie Bloom. I live on Rambling Road in the Winchell neighborhood. A few years ago, I first heard about the natural features, and I was really impressed by what was going to happen. But my concern now is that what we see about to happen is a watering down of natural features. I think that we have, on the one hand, we have the state of Michigan that invests in things like Asylum Lake with grants to help protect and maintain it. And then we have the city coming in with the other hand and about to make a move that may actually do more damage. I'm very adamantly opposed to the change of zoning to the community commercial. I think it is a disaster for the city and the community. I think overall, the natural features needs to be reconsidered and strengthened not in any way weakened. Thank you.
I'm Karen Larson. I live at 2313 Parkview Avenue. At one of the meetings 3 years ago, I asked you to look at the names that are written behind you. I'm not sure how many of you have looked at what you sit underneath, but almost all of those people acted on behalf of the people. Not on behalf of the government, but they did it for the people. We are experiencing 100-year rainfalls 2 or 3 times last year, just recently. It's not going to get any better. It's going to increase because of our lack of taking care of the nature and the natural places we have. The animal corridor, which is right through that property, is going to cause some major, major disruptions in Oakwood neighborhood and in Oakland Winchell. We already know that both neighborhoods are inundated with all deer that come in at all times of days and nights. One of these days, people are going to get injured when they hit one of those, more or less when we have to see it. We are at a cross point. We have children that are out asking for us to do something for them. You guys have the opportunity to make that happen for the future generations. And that's what I'm hoping that you will choose for. It's not us. It's the 7th generation out that we have to prepare for. And we needed to do it long before this. But this is the defining time. It can't change. But we can change. Thank you.
Forgive me. My name is Eric Brokus. I'm the owner and president of Rick and Stan's Car Wash. We've been a locally owned business here in Southwest Michigan since 1983. Since that time, we've grown from a single location to now having 8 locations across the Allegan, Plainwell, and Kalamazoo area. Since I'm on the clock, I'll get right to it. I'm not here to argue about any zoning changes. I think there are enough people here who will do that for me. Personally, I am very worried about the ordinance changes that now specifically call out an exception that if a property is zoned CC, that a car wash does not need to apply for a special use permit. I've built car washes in multiple cities and townships over the years, and I have never not needed to apply for a special use permit. Generally, gas stations and car washes usually go hand in hand with both requiring a special use permit. I'm just not sure what the rationale there would be to require for a gas station but not a car wash. Look, I'm a pro car wash guy. It's what I do for a living. But car washes raise red flags, and rightfully so. There are a lot of things to consider about whether a spot is right for a car wash. From vacuum noise to blow dryer noise to the ridiculous amount of trash that customers come to the car wash to just dump in your parking lot. It's a lot. If a car wash is going to be a successful and productive member of the community, the general public needs to buy into it and needs a chance to voice their opinion about it. Taking away the need for a special use permit would eliminate this. Yesterday, I shared via email the zoning requirements for Oshtemo Township, which is literally a stone's throw away on the other side of Drake. Oshtemo does what I would consider to be normal from what I have dealt with over the years. Even in the most high-intensity commercial zoning, both gas stations and car washes still require a special use permit. Another car wash friend of mine in the Detroit area broke ground in a beautiful new $4 million facility last summer. 2 months after he broke ground, Tommy's Car Wash, another national car wash chain, purchased the property right next to him. And when I say right next to him, I mean they literally share a parking lot. My friend obviously approached the township and asked in what world is it necessary to have 2 brand new car washes in the same parking lot. The answer he received was this: we agree with you 100%. Unfortunately, our hands are tied. The zoning allows for it. There's nothing we can do. Car washes right now are experiencing a boom unlike anything that our industry has seen before. 2008 was a very hard time for everyone, but car washes specifically. This was effectively the birth of the unlimited car wash subscription model. This model changed the entire industry overnight. As you can imagine, many investors and private equity funds latched onto this very quickly and found out that with consistent revenue and relatively low labor, car washes were now one of the hottest investments around. Since then, car washes have been multiplying at a rapid rate across the entire country. Right now, there's 18 of them in
Anyone else? Okay. All right.
I live on Lake Boulevard in Edison neighborhood, and as far as I know, Asylum Lake's property only allows 20 feet in that corner from the lake shore. That's all that Asylum Lake has. The natural overlay only gives another 50 feet. I don't know if you've been over there or walked over there. Stadium Drive, it's a straight hill. So any development, they would have to backfill to make a level lot to build. So 70 feet from all the runoff from that down to the lake is not enough. And that's within the current whatever's going on now. So just something to think about. I really encourage you to go there, visit the place, make your decision based on what you think is the best thing to do, if it's worth cutting down all these trees, if it's worth completely changing the way the water flows. The Asylum Lake's already been assaulted by all of the development from the Costco parking lot. All of that runoff from all of that parking lot flows into culverts under the road. It eventually makes its way into Asylum Lake. Anything and everything in those parking lots is flowing into Asylum Lake. Yes, it goes through retention ponds. They overflow into the lake. Something to consider.
Hello, thank you. My name is Lynn Heasley. I'm at 1444 West Maple Street. I'm faculty at Western Michigan University. I'm also on the Asylum Lake Management and Policy Council. 3 weeks ago, we had a community forum on Asylum Lake, and the purpose of the forum was to update any community members interested in the latest research and restoration efforts underway at Asylum Lake. So we had a very nice presentation from Kaiser & Associates and some other consultants about different kinds of restoration efforts going on. And one of the most exciting announcements that we had was a $250,000 grant in order to restore the water quality of Asylum Lake, and that includes experimental technologies that may or may not prove to deal with the salt runoff that's actually contaminating Asylum Lake and affecting the ecosystem of the water itself and the life in the water. Many people in the room were at this event 3 years ago. I remember that it went till something like 1 in the morning with comments. And we celebrated both the vision, but also the commitment of the Planning Commission to our community to honor the integrity of not just that place for its own sake, but the integrity of the commitment of Kalamazoo to its residents and to input into the way we want to see the future of our area. And so that future orientation doesn't always have to be about standardization and conformity. It can be the amenities that make the city an exciting place. There was a black joke made at that forum 3 weeks ago about the car wash, and that was literally a week before word started circulating about the possibility of exempting car washes from special use permits. We thought we had come to an agreement, and we thought that you yourselves had made that same commitment to us. I ask you to not weaken the natural features overlay, and I ask you strongly to not give special use permit exemptions to one particular industry and possibly to one particular company that's not even in the state. Thank you.
Anyone else? All right, seeing no one, are there any phone-in comments?
Let me check. There are no calls.
All right, thank you very much. That will then conclude the public comment section of the meeting. Thank you all for your comments and your attendance. We appreciate that and giving us some things to think about as we continue this process. So thank you. Commissioner Pradel.
How about now? Sound okay? Good evening, everyone. Good evening to everyone who's here tonight. Thank you to everyone who's here tonight to listen in and to speak. It's always great to see a full crowd on differing issues. Wanted to make sure to give everybody an update as well. At our last city commission meeting, we selected a finalist for our city attorney search, which is a very important role for our community. We selected Aaron Liel, who is our finalist. He's the current city attorney in Royal Oak. He has over 25 years experience in municipal law. He's spent the last 6 years as the city attorney either at Royal Oak or a suburb community of Dallas-Fort Worth called Denton. He had an impressive track record. He fought for anti-fracking in the Denton community while he was there, but also was very integral to creating over 12,000 housing units in a very short amount of period because of the growth in that area. He's the son of immigrants and grew up in the Rio Grande Valley. He's a highly impressive candidate. We're so excited to welcome him to the Kalamazoo family, and I hope you get a chance to meet him soon as well. So now it goes to working on contract negotiations and background checks. We're hopeful that that all works out well, and hopefully we'll have him in place before the start of June. So, other thing I wanted to make sure, since we didn't really have any updates from the last Planning Commission of things to report back to this group as well, the City Commission accepted $3.9 million in lead hazard reduction grants from the federal government and an additional $696,000 for this Healthy Homes grant. Effectively, what that's going to do is provide funding for 126 homes in our community that had lead contamination in the home, old, typically historic homes, where there are young children, especially under 6 years old, that live in the home or expectant parents. That's a huge win for the city. I'm so excited to see that be implemented here in the next 4 years. That is a massive amount, almost $4 million for that work. So that's a big win for the city of Kalamazoo and for young families here as well. And then also, since we last met as well, we allocated an additional $1 million for the second year in a row towards KidNet to provide youth programming predominantly focused towards children during the summer months who don't have a positive outlet and otherwise wouldn't have been able to afford to be involved in different activities. This grant last year provided programming to almost 1,400 youth in our community, employed 206 people, and it also supported the work of 32 different organizations. That was a huge lift for our community. It was really impressive to see a way to keep our young people, and especially some of our most vulnerable young people, active last year, and hopefully we'll see some more of that this summer as well. I wanted to just share an example of one program similar to this work that we're doing that we have funded in previous years. I don't know if you've heard it before, but it's called Bridging Opportunities. It's a funded program where we select a very small select group of students, typically somewhere between 8 and 10 students or young youth, with the Boys and Girls Club. And basically what they do is they offer a 38-week program. And let me give you a couple statistics here. So these 8 youth, prior to this program implementation, had 161 police cases combined. 161 police cases, 8 children, okay? Post-program, those same 8 individuals had 7 police cases, and most of those were between just 1 or 2 individuals. It's a massive reduction. And so you can see where this investment in our young people is making a significant difference and will continue to make a significant difference. And then lastly, I also wanted to share that we formed a First Amendment subcommittee. I've had a pleasure of being a part of that group since 2020. With part of that and with CSCRAB, our police oversight board, we worked to basically conduct an independent investigation with what was called the OIR group. They made 40 recommendations in a report for us to make as a city to improve from learning from the happenings of 2020. Of those 40 recommendations, as of this last fall, 35 of those had been actively worked on and investigated by the police to work on and improve situations. There were 5 recommendations left that involved community engagement. In the last month, we had 2 evenings where we had a community involvement with 17 individuals who basically spent 2 weeks and 2 evenings to work with us to address those 5 final items, and they came to a final recommendation. So effectively, after that work a couple weeks ago, we now have all 40 of those recommendations in the OIR report have been addressed by public safety in the city of Kalamazoo. I'm really proud of that work and the fact that even now almost 3 years later that we've kept at that work to continuously improve what we do. Other than that, I wish you all well, wish you a great month. It's a beautiful night seeing the sunshine in through the windows here, and I hope to see you guys here again next month. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Can I ask one question or make one request?
Sure.
This zoning ordinance process that we're going through it's more substantial than a typical recommendation that we make to city commission.
Sure.
As a result, if in your conversations with commissioners or in the work that you're doing over the next couple months, if there is something that rises up that you, either yourself or you catch wind that, yeah, this ain't gonna fly with the city commission or whatever,
yes,
if you can let us know so that we don't, I guess, for lack of a better term, waste a lot of time
absolutely
debating something when we know, okay, it's just gonna fall flat when it goes to your level,
yeah,
then we can know that ahead of time. Generally, we wouldn't do that. We wouldn't want that type of feedback or influence ahead of time, but I think considering the magnitude of what we're dealing with here, that might be good feedback, especially during these workshop sessions when we're sort of learning and gathering steam, and just getting that feedback in one form or another, I think would be helpful.
Absolutely. No, I appreciate that feedback. I know Deputy Director Christina Anderson presented us to us at length a couple weeks back at City Commission, which was really appreciated to get that ball started so early.
I know.
One of the observations, I think somebody up here made this tonight, I apologize, I can't remember who made that comment, but it is a lot to digest. And I think when we made a major kind of omnibus change to the Code of Ordinances, you remember the whole defecation instance downtown, I think a lot of that challenge came from the fact that there was so much for the community to digest in such a big omnibus piece of updates, that it was hard to even kind of counteract the bits and pieces that were getting picked out or dissected or misinterpreted. And I think like one of the things that I had mentioned during the presentation afterwards as well is just my concern that we do a good job of making sure that we don't lump things all together, that it becomes too overwhelming and confusing, that if there's any ways to dissect things and make sure that we can clump them in understandable portions, both for the commission, for the planning commission, and for the community, I think that's going to be pretty important. And that we do our due diligence and take our time, that if we need to pump the brakes to provide additional time for learning and whatnot, we can. The one thing that I do know about Deputy Director Anderson is that she always makes herself available to us and does such a tremendous job of calling us, talking to us, and I would imagine this will be no different. And I can certainly be as much help as necessary, as well as being liaison to keep you guys posted of what I'm hearing as well.
Wonderful.
But I appreciate that thought, and the feelings are very much mutual, so thank you.
Good. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Great. Planning Commissioner comments. Any Planning Commissioner comments this evening? Quiet. The one I've got, we have 2 empty seats on our Planning Commission, and we have received a significant number of applications, I understand. Christina is just behind the monitor. Yes, thumbs up. So we need to create a committee of members. Do we know 2, 3? Just 2 of us?
I think so.
Just 2 of us. To cull through those. So first step will be to cull through the applications and select a finite number, a manageable number to meet with, and then to have some interviews and select from those 2 members to join our esteemed panel up here. So I'm looking for volunteers.
We can do 3.
Oh, we can do 3?
Sorry.
All right, there we go. So we have 1, Ms. Chambers. Oh, 2, Ms. Swan. All right, anyone else? Oh, Mr. Patel. All right.
Can't be 4, so you will not be able to participate. You guys can work amongst yourselves. Yeah.
Well, thumbs the brakes. So if I'm needed to be called in, I'm happy to do that, scheduling wise or whatever. Sometimes I remember in the past it's been hard to arrange schedules, so I can be on the bench ready to be called in as needed for sure. Well, thank you all. Other than that, this is as I stated before, this is why we get paid the big bucks. So this is the hard work. So thank you guys for getting engaged and continuing to be engaged. We got a taste of it. This is what we can expect for the next couple months. So continue the hard work, continue what we're doing. So thank you. Seeing no other comments and nothing else on the agenda, our agenda is closed and we are adjourned. Thank you.